my family has a really strong medicine tradition, and so a lot of the women and men too in my family practice like
some traditional medicine.
Yeah, like traditional medicines, like energy healing, like ceremonies, practices, rituals, right? Being like the medicine person of your community.
Yeah.
And I have in the past 6 years really taken up that work myself. And I recognize that those are gifts that come from my family. And I also know that because I was born here, I have a really special relationship and also rights, responsibilities, and obligations to this area that has given me power.
Kendall is a researcher. Kendall, what do you research?
So lately I've been saying that I research media representations of marginalized communities, and the reason that I'm saying that is because I have been looking at, as a film and media studies scholar, the ways in which people in media like anime and manga and comic books are represented as stereotypes, and the different communities that I've been looking at are Indigenous communities in North America, but also queer communities. And so this comes from my intersectional identity as a queer person, my relationship to the communities around me, so the Indigenous communities of this area, as well as the spiritual work that I do, which is informed by Indigenous ceremonies and practices and knowledges. Yeah.
Let's talk about you.
Okay, let's talk about me.
Let's talk about Kendall. So Kendall was giving me a ride. We traveled to the next town. And during that ride, we started talking about indigenous. We had discussions about.
Apparently, I never stopped bringing it up. So here we are.
But we saw while we were making that trip, we passed Lake Superior, one of the big lakes in Michigan.
It's one of the Great Lakes. One of the 5 Great Lakes.
One of the 5 Great Lakes.
Yes.
Yeah. So Kendall was explaining how she's connected to this land and these waters, and why it will be the best place to live, to stay. I'm thinking around that. Why do you feel so connected to this place?
Yeah.
If you were just 5, 6 generations away, traceable generations away.
Yeah. I think that's a question that I've had to really think about myself over and over again. And the best answer that I have right now is that knowing where my family, my ancestors have come from, and why they came here, and where they've been in this area, so in the many towns that we have up in Houghton County, Michigan, as well as beyond, and why they come back here, and why I come back here, right?
Yes.
So my family has a really strong medicine tradition, and so a lot of the women and men too in my family practice like
some traditional medicine.
Yeah, like traditional medicines, like energy healing, like ceremonies, practices, rituals, right? Being like the medicine person of your community.
Yeah.
And I have in the past 6 years really taken up that work myself. And I recognize that those are gifts that come from my family. And I also know that because I was born here, I have a really special relationship and also rights, responsibilities, and obligations to this area that has given me power. If you think about it in terms of like the water here is magnificent. This body of water, which is like a natural force, is one of the most potent water forces in the world. It's incredible. And to be in presence of that every day of your life, it just feels like you have to give back, right? For something that has sustained you for your entire life, and you maybe didn't think about it as a kid. Now I feel like as an adult, I have obligations to the place that I live in to make sure that I'm also giving back and I'm sustaining the land and waters in the same way that they've done for me. And also all of my family.
You're speaking some things that are pretty spiritual here. So let's do some analysis. I'm a Christian.
Okay.
And I have some understanding about spirituality and about connection with a higher power.
Yeah.
And I believe in God.
Okay.
And now when you talk about being connected to the land, being connected, you were born here, you feel like you have to give back to this land, you feel like this land has given you.
Yeah.
Explain that relationship.
Yeah.
What has the land given you? Who gives power and who gives energy? Is it the land is giving you, or you're the one giving the land?
So that's such an interesting question, and I want to try to bridge these connections between like your religious experiences and your understanding of God, because I also, like, when I pray, sometimes I also pray to God, like, as in a Christian sense. But I like, as a person who thinks in a polytheistic way, like, I recognize that the water and the land are also, for me, spiritual forces. So I see the lake Gijigami as like its own deity, right? Like its own god, its own goddess, its own really special force.
I think you're sounding more like you practice African traditional religion, because African tradition is just exactly the same way.
Really?
Where we acknowledge that the land gives energy,
Mm-hmm.
we acknowledge that the water body has powers.
Yeah.
But Christianity is a bit different. Christianity creates this unification of power to the Almighty God. Mm-hmm. In Christianity, the land has no power. The waters have no power. Mm-hmm. Every power belongs to Almighty God.
You know what though, Genius? Like, when you think about baptism,
that's
a practice that you have as a Christian, right?
Yes.
That water has power, right? But it does come from this very specific source in your like religious understanding of the world. And I think, like, for me too, there are greater forces beyond like these land and waters that imbue these places with those, like, that magic and those gifts and that force, but also that they are entities unto themselves that deserve their own level of respect. And so, like, in a power kind of relationship way, I think of my relationship as, like, with the land and the waters as them being the greater forces, and me having a level of reverence and respect and reciprocating to my best ability, but also knowing that, like, these are the greater forces here, and I respect them.
Interesting. This is kind of deep.
Yeah.
This kind of deep. But I have I don't know how spiritual or how religious my question is, mm-hmm. but thinking about your relationship with land, place, mm-hmm. water, and if you live, is there a wall between you and the land?
Yeah.
In the spiritual sense, or even if you move to Nigeria, even if you move to Thailand, wherever you move, there's no bridge.
So, in my spiritual practices and beliefs, there are lines of energy across the world, like the latitude and longitudinal lines, mm-hmm. that connect all places in the world. Okay. And lately I've been trying to think of not just this area as my home, but the entire earth as my home, and really expanding my perspective. And so I think that no matter where I go, I will have a connection to this place because I was born here, but also because I don't think I'll ever stop coming back. I don't think there will ever be a moment in my life where I won't be drawn to be here.
Yeah. But where we are is Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the coldest part of America.
Yes. Well, almost. Minnesota's a little bit colder, but this is a beautiful, unique place.
Well, it is. It is. But when you experience winter, the snow, after 3 months, you get tired of it. Mm-hmm. And you have many more months. The snow here lasts for 9 months. And after 3 months, you get tired of it. But Kendall loves it. 9 months of winter. Kendall loves the 9 months of snow. I don't like it. I confess. I love snow for 3 months. After 3 months, thank you so much.
Right, like it's hard to live up here because it's not only the snow, but it's the cold, it's the wind that comes from the lake, and it's also the fact that it's dark most of the time. And it's only as an adult in recent years, let me tell you, that I have tried to enjoy the winter as opposed to hating it the whole time.
Oh, and so what do you do that creates the enjoyment? I mean, being born here is an advantage, I think. Yeah. You have more close to family and relationships you've built over years. Yeah. So I think that helps.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps. But last year, for example, we had a really crazy snowstorm right around Christmas, and I was outside shoveling for like hours every day. And I had a lot of fun with it because in my brain I was trying to think of the ways in which my ancestors would have been outside in the snow for hours and how they would have handled being in that environment. And so, like, feeling that connection and having that moment of creativity and imagination really made a huge difference in my understanding of what it meant to go out there and shovel.
let's connect your research to these experiences. Your experiences with land, your experiences with acknowledgement of this water, acknowledgement of the energy you share with this place.
Yeah.
How does that influence your research, academic research work?
At first, it didn't. I didn't feel or know that there was a way to connect my research to like these greater questions or these feelings that I had or the practices that I do in my personal life until I started thinking about land acknowledgement statements and doing that original project and then learning that there were ways to incorporate that into the research. So like before I did any of this land acknowledgement statement or Indigenous studies research, I was focused in doing Japanese anime and manga, which I'm still doing. I've been able to bridge those two things together. But it was finally until somebody challenged me to figure out how to put those things together that I felt like I had permission to bring this into my academic practices. And now it's a huge part of what I do. So I'm really grateful.
Interesting. So how can we separate you from the land if we want to separate you from the land? Is that possible?
So, I mean, for me, like as a person who...
Has that become a sort of identity?
Yeah, I think like knowing where I come from and why I am born here, right? And like
is there a why?
Well,
how do you find the why?
Yeah. So like when I give land acknowledgement statements, I explain to my audience that I'm a fourth generation Finnish and Celtic settler. And I think...
What does that mean? First generation Finnish settler?
So being a fourth generation Finnish and Celtic heritage settler means that 4 generations ago, my family came to settle in this area. Mm-hmm. And I want to recognize where they came from and why I'm here. And that's why I'm here. That's my why. I think like there's certainly differences between the experiences of Indigenous people reclaiming their lands and their histories and their cultures and their peoples versus what I'm trying to do with my own ancestors and like the very like fractured family histories that I have that I'm trying to overcome versus what African American communities in the United States are going through. But there's commonalities, right? Yeah. Like there's one of the commonalities is this trauma that's been induced by ruptures, fracturing, and separations between communities, languages, histories, and the lands where you come from. And there's a sense of comfort, but also growth and like a sense of belonging that you get when you reclaim those things, right? Yeah. And I think so. I think there's certainly like common experiences there, but contextually, historically, and contemporarily, like they're very different in many ways.
So I want us to conclude by you connecting all this to new settlements we're seeing through migration.
Okay.
People are moving.
Yeah.
People will always migrate. Mm-hmm. It's not gonna stop. No matter the wall America builds, we'll still come to America. Yeah. I mean, America's like, let's build a wall. For the past few years, it's been, the political scene in America is like, let's build a wall, let's build a wall, let's build a wall. No matter the wall you build, people will still migrate. Migration will keep on because humans are meant to move. I think it's part of our being, moving.
It's part of our DNA.
Yes, it's part of us moving.
Yeah.
So when people move to new places, and these new places becomes home, do you think until they give birth to a new generation, the connection with the new land cannot be established? Based on your experiences and studies.
Sure. One really interesting thing that has come up for me recently in some of the research that I've been working on with other folks here at Michigan Tech is contextualizing human migration by thinking about the migration of animals and plants and other natural forces for all of time and space, right? And thinking about us as being this, like the migration of humans is very natural, as you're saying. That's part of our heritage. That's what we do. And to think about it in that way, I think really shifts perspective away from like fear and like a feeling like there's a lack of resources to share or whatever it is.
Yeah.
To one of like reciprocity and not obstructing people from doing those very natural things. But also when you're moving and you're in a new land space, a new territory, like for me, I think no matter, if you think about it from the perspective, again, which I'm new to thinking about, is like the earth is your home. So if you can learn about the lands or the waters or the people, right, the places that you live, whether they're brand new to you or you've lived there your whole life, I think you can make meaningful connections. Because in my very like spiritual lens, I think about you know, like the souls of the trees or the grass or the rocks or the birds or what have you that's around you. You're connected to that no matter what. Like that's your birthright and your heritage as a human being.
Yeah.
And so like there's never there never needs to be, I think, like a displacement or a disconnect from yourself and like the lands.
You know, but that's really difficult. I mean,
yeah.
I moved from Nigeria to Sweden.
Yeah.
From when I felt like I was having a connection to Sweden, I moved to America.
Okay.
And now I have to build a new connection.
Yeah.
And I have friends. There are stories of the difficulties in these connections, the difficulties in trying to build a new or acknowledge places, land, waters, or wherever it is around you as your new home.
Yeah.
And if you are moving for maybe people who move for economic reasons, they tend to keep moving. You know?
Yeah.
That could be very, very difficult. How do you imagine migrants balance up the relationship between home countries? Because they still have either families over home countries or they have some sort of relationship still, they are still servicing back in their former homes.
Right.
How do you think migrants could create such balance in accepting a new place to be the perfect home?
Yeah.
Is there a formula to that? Being an expert and a researcher in this area.
No, that's a really interesting question. I think like there's never going to be a perfect home. You know, that's a really high expectation to set on the places that you live. But furthermore, there's a difference between the very physical and everyday connections that you have with the place that you live and the feeling of settling in that place, which you're speaking to. So like what I was speaking to was the very like spiritual or religious connection that you have with everything around you.
Yeah.
And whether you know the history or the names or you know, the trees and the plants and the animals, like all those material facts of where you live, what I'm trying to get at is that you still have the spiritual connection. However, I can imagine, you know, I've lived in a couple of different places in the United States, but I can imagine like being a migrant or constantly moving to different places and different continents, like having that sense of discontinuity or not feeling that connection as much because you're focused on this survival aspect of I have to find a place to live and all these other, you know, very important priorities. And so like, I think maybe what I'm saying is having like maybe feeling that like spiritual connection might be a bit of a privilege that I'm speaking to. So I don't really have an answer, I don't think, but it's a very
I think I got one. I mean, the summary of what I got from what you just said is this: for those who are moving, constantly moving, try to create a spiritual connection with the place you are in, and that could create a faster home for you.
Yeah, like knowing that you're home in your body, I think that's really important.
Oh, Kendall, thank you so much for coming to this channel.
Of course.
We're gonna invite her again, and she has to promise us that she's gonna be here.
Oh, I'll be here.
That's a promise. See ya.
All right, bye everyone.